The North Atlantic right whale is one of the largest whales on the planet, with only 384 individuals left. But this year, for the first time ever, their population didn't drop. It actually went up slightly. It's a small glimmer of hope for this species pushed to the edge by ship strikes, fishing entanglement, and a rapidly changing ocean. So what's actually working and what still needs to change is what we're going to be talking about on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. Now, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the North Atlantic right whale. I know we talked a little bit about it the other day when we talked about their slight increase in population numbers. I want to get to the bottom of it. I want to find out if this number is truly something to hope for, a 2% increase, or is it something that we still need to be cautious about. So I invited Nora Ives from Oceana to come on the podcast to talk about her campaign work about the North Atlantic right whale. She is a storyteller, she is an educator, she is a scientist, and she's a campaigner for Oceana, and she's here to talk all about the North Atlantic right whale, what we should be looking out for, and what we need to know so that we can better protect these animals. We're going to find that out all on this episode. Before we do, I just want to remind you, I am putting out a campaign, a crowdfunding campaign to start another podcast in the podcast network for Speak Up for Blue. This podcast is part of this network about seagrasses. I know we're talking about whales, but we're also talking about another productive habitat called seagrasses, and it's called the Seagrass Effect. I want to put it out because we need to not only bring research, restoration efforts, and conservation efforts together for the seagrass world and for seagrass research, but we also need to have restoration efforts. And by contributing to this campaign, not only are you going to be contributing to information sharing across the world, but you're also going to be contributing to a restoration for a particular site of seagrass that's being restored somewhere around the world. We're going to document it. We're going to talk about it. It's going to be amazing, and I can't wait for you to find out. So if you go to speakupforblue.com/seagrass, you can contribute to that campaign. We're on the Ballion platform, which is a new platform that is spurring ocean projects, independent ocean projects that are going on, just like this Seagrass Effect podcast that I want to start. So go to speakupforblue.com/seagrass. Take a look at their projects after you donate to mine. Now, here's the interview with Nora Ives from Oceana talking about the North Atlantic right whale. Enjoy, and I'll talk to you after. Hey, Nora, welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about the North Atlantic right whale?
Oh, I'm excited to talk about them. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
You bet. I'm very excited to talk about them too, because we had some pretty interesting news about North Atlantic right whales for the last, I'm going to say, other than this year, for the last 5 years, it seems like the population continues to go down and down and down, the numbers. And every year, we see we have to change the way we're doing things. We have to protect them. Climate change is affecting them. Entanglements are affecting them. And then, of course, ship strikes are affecting them. So we have to do this. And sometimes it feels really depressing if you think about it, when you see this population continuing to go down, including the female reproductive numbers that are going down. But this year was a little different. It kind of stalled a little bit, and we saw a slight increase in those numbers. I did an episode to say, hey, there's a little bit of celebration, cautiously optimistic in this respect, but next year's numbers will definitely tell the tale of whether we're going on an uptick or a downtick. But what I wanted to do today, and it's so nice to have you on, because Oceana has done such great work in following the North Atlantic right whale population, the counts, and making sure that we're all up to date on them. So I want to have you on the podcast to be like, hey, what can we say about this? What can we do in the future? What's being done currently that's working and what's not working? And obviously, there's going to be some things that need to be changed, and government's going to need to kind of kick in some help, not only in the U.S., but also in Canada. So we're going to find out all about that. But Nora, before we do, why don't you just let us know who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Nora Ives. I'm the marine scientist on our North Atlantic right whale campaign at Oceana in the U.S. So my job is all things science to do with North Atlantic right whales. So that could be keeping up to date on the most current research, making sure everything we do is based in science and fact, translating that science into comms materials, coming up with new policy strategies to lobby for on the Hill to best protect these critically endangered whales.
I love it. I love it. Now, this is not an easy job to do. This is something that's it's very difficult. It takes a lot of knocking on doors, talking to a lot of different people, politicians, other organizations, advocates, and so forth. It's a big team, and it requires like a lot of different skill sets as someone who does your job. Let's go a little bit back into your life in terms of how you got here. Why don't you discuss sort of what got you interested in the environment, and sort of what led you to this path?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have, I guess, sort of an unconventional background. I'm an educator, a storyteller, and a scientist, but my first job was teaching environmental science as a teenager at a wildlife refuge in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And again, I'd always had these two loves in my life: environmental science, conservation, and also theater. And so in undergrad, yeah, I actually majored in theater and moved to New York City after I graduated, got offered a job, worked as an assistant director off Broadway, experienced all the great success. We had a New York Times critic pick musical off Broadway.
Nice.
But then I sort of had this aha moment of, okay, this is fantastic. I have this family and I've learned all these skills and put them to practice. But our planet's still burning down and we live in the era of climate change. And I have these valuable skills that can translate to the field of conservation. As well as, a passion and a bit of a background in science and environmental conservation. So then I bought a one-way ticket to Maui. And,
as one does.
As one does. Yep, absolutely. Why not? And took a job with Pacific Whale Foundation, working on their boats as
nice.
As a marine naturalist and a first mate. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome! We love Pacific Whale Foundation. We've had them on here before.
Oh, great!
To do lots of work. They do a lot of great work with whales and dolphins and so forth. It's great to hear. Now, take me through this, because you're going from theater, and then you're seeing what's happening around us in the planet. Like you're going from something that seems, now I'm going to say seems steady. I know theater is not steady by any means in terms of work and stuff like that, but you're on one career path. You see what's happening. Like, take me to that point where you're just like, no, I have to do something. What are you feeling in that moment? That's got to be a big decision to switch from one path to another.
Yeah, I guess to distill it down, it was just the feeling of I can do more. I know I can offer more and I can bring more to this fight. And I think storytelling is incredibly important. You don't fall in love with facts, you fall in love with story. I think maybe Obama said that. But I love that quote because it's so true and pertinent to our work. It's valuable in my work as an educator. I get students, no matter their age, excited about something if they can follow the story and follow the narrative and connect the dots themselves through narrative, and have some ownership that way. And I think that same principle applies to good conservation work. Constituents, lawmakers, they're going to pay attention and remember the story of this specific whale and her journey to becoming a mother and what happened to her calf. They're not going to remember the numbers and stats on the population per se, or how many whales were killed this year. They're going to remember that one whale story. So I think it's really important and powerful and a fantastic, fun tool. Also, we want to have fun in what we're doing, find the joy in our day-to-day, and I think it's a powerful organizing tool as well.
Okay, so now you're in Maui. And paradise for many of us, going out on whale watching on tours and educating people who are paying to go out on these whale watching tours, watching humpbacks in the winter as they come in and they congregate and do their thing, and clear blue waters, blue skies, a little bit of wind, hitting the ship. Did this give you the fulfillment of like, I've got to do something, as educating, because, ocean literacy is a huge part of conservation. Did this satisfy what you wanted to do in your thinking when you first said, hey, I need to join the fight?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, nothing beats being on the water every day, working with wildlife, working with the public, educating, like you say, watching that spark ignite behind their eyes and see that flame, get carried back to their own communities, wherever they're flying home to. I mean, it's amazing. And I have so many amazing stories from my time working with Pacific Whale Foundation and working on the boat. Oh man, there's one anecdote that always stays with me. It was during the winter season, so I'm sure it sounds like you're familiar with this packed boat, probably 100
Yeah.
passengers, double-decker
Yeah.
boat, and I'm on like 3 of 4 whale watching trips that day, and I get a note saying one of our passengers is blind, and if we can make any
Oh,
accommodations, we're open to it. So I'm like
yeah.
thinking, I'm like, whew, I'm the lead narrator, like, what can I do? Thinking creatively, using my theater skills, thinking outside the box, thinking on my feet. And I said, okay, if we get the opportunity to be near a mom and calf and come close to the boat, I'm going to ask the entire boat, all 100 plus passengers, to be silent for a minute and see if they'll comply. Because if you've been on a whale watching boat before with humpback whales and they get close, you know what that sounds like when they exhale right next to you. And you can just feel the impact of this giant animal next to you in the water. You can hear it. You can maybe even smell it, get that fishy whale breath.
Yeah.
So sure enough, we got mugged by mom and calf. And I was like, and mugging means they're within a limit of distance to the boat. So the boat can't maneuver until they leave to maintain safety. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So we have this mom and calf. I'm like, oh, this is my moment. So I'm on the mic. All right. We have this amazing mom and calf to the left of our vessel. If everyone could please humor me and, just let's all stop talking for 30 seconds and see if we can all together listen to this giant mother exhale. And everyone played along. Everyone was awesome. And we got that moment. And, sure enough, the passenger and his family member came up to me afterwards and was like, thank you so much. Like, that allowed me to access that in a way I probably wouldn't have normally.
Right.
So I think I got a bit off topic, but yeah.
No, but that's what it is. That's what it's about. It's to make sure everybody can enjoy not only, the view, obviously the sight of it and seeing them that close or seeing them up close anywhere is amazing, but to hear them and to hear what they go through and just kind of hear that breath, that one like exhale of that blow, and you're just like, that was pretty cool. And who knows, like that could change that person's life for a while, to be able to hear that. And that those accommodations are probably not done often, but it was great that you were able to do that, because that's part of the story, right? As someone who podcasts, it's not just video, it's audio, and you're in the ear of people. And oftentimes I've thought about just like playing sound effects as we go by. It's a big production. It's another layer to the complexity of storytelling. And it's something that I think would bring a lot of value, and to hear it up front live and to get that like at that timing, that's nice. That's nice that she was able to accommodate you guys to be able to do that. So how long were you doing that for?
Just about a year. And I guess to your point, those on the ground moments are incredibly impactful and will stay with me forever. But I did again have that second aha moment where I was like, all right, I want to impact change at a bigger level. I think I need to do it at the policy level, to help strengthen these laws to protect these animals. I need to go back to grad school. And so that's where my journey took me next, and got my master's and eventually made my way to Oceana.
So you got your master's at Duke, correct? Like
Correct,
in their
yeah.
environmental science program, like their graduate environmental science?
Yes.
Great program at Duke. And it's catapulted a lot of people's careers after that, which is amazing. What was the biggest thing that you learned in that program that has helped you today?
Ooh, wow, what a great question.
Probably learned a lot.
Oh, yeah. I was like, I always describe those 2 years as I was like a kid in the candy store, because again, this is kind of like my second career, so I'm a little older, wiser, and I just overloaded every semester. I was like, I want to take all the classes. I want to talk to all the professors, collaborate with all my cohort, and got to spend my second year at the Marine Lab on the coast, which is like magical summer camp.
Cool. I've been there.
Yeah.
It's so nice. So nice.
Yeah, magical summer camp for ocean nerds. So that was fantastic. I got my master's in environmental management. But your question was what? Oh man, the biggest takeaway. I think I was a little nervous, I guess, going to the program, thinking, okay, I have to go here to learn as much as I possibly can, which I did. But I think it also instilled an understanding that, bringing it back to the theater career, like the real world skills I already had coming into it, of learning how to hustle, how to collaborate, how to negotiate conflicts, were just as valuable, if not more so, to bring us tools in the toolkit to solving these conservation problems. Skills that aren't necessarily taught in the classroom, or learned through reading a paper. So,
yeah. That's amazing. And be able to use that. You probably come in through such a different lens, when you have that background. Mm-hmm. How difficult was it to go back to school after having, great, jobs where you're earning money, and you can pay for stuff, and then you go back to grad school where it's full time, 2 years? Is that
Correct.
The idea?
Yeah.
Full time. What was that like? That's got to be a bit of a financial challenge as well. No?
Yes and no. First off, I'm a lifelong learner, educated at heart always. So I was in heaven in one regard. And also it was during COVID. So I felt pretty darn lucky to not have to be struggling with unemployment, to have a place to land and a community to feel safe in, and to feel like I was making progress in a very strange time for all of us. So I was very lucky.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting. Well, hey, going back to school was a perfect time to go at that point too, which is great to hear. And then after that, Oceana job came up, and you got the position in Oceana?
Not quite. I went to the West Coast, worked for a consulting firm, environmental consulting firm, worked for a state agency, and learned a lot about how that works, and have a deep appreciation for our friends in government, but also confirmed my pre-existing belief that NGOs are where it's at for me. And this dream job came up, and I jumped on the opportunity to work. I mean, what more could you ask for, working on the most critically endangered large whale? I mean, what better fight is there to be in?
Absolutely, and it is a crucial fight, because we know the numbers are down. The numbers came out, I believe it was at the last meeting, October 21st. We're at 384 individuals estimated. Still low, but it is an increase. I believe it was at 362 or something like that.
372. Yep.
372. Mm-hmm. So we're up about 12 individuals, which when you look at longer term, like long-lived species, that's a slight increase, but obviously nothing we could go crazy over and have a parade over by any means. But it's nice to see from Oceana's perspective. What is the organization's sort of perspective on that in terms of that increase? Is this something to celebrate, or something we still need to be cautious about?
Well, we say every calf is a reason to celebrate. Every new whale added to the population is a reason to celebrate. And like you said, it was estimated the previous year at 372. Now we're estimating 384. That's roughly a 2% increase, which if we could continue that steadily for another 10 to 15, I would definitely take it. That being said, it's not enough. It's nowhere near enough. Mm-hmm. We're talking 382 individuals on the planet. That's insane, right? But it does just prove how resilient they are. I mean, they have every obstacle thrown at them, and they're still surviving and doing their best to migrate down to the calving grounds and bring us new calves every year. So they're really incredible, resilient animals.
Perfect. Let's talk a little bit about that in terms of their range, right? You said they calve in the winter down. Can you just talk about where they go, and then in the summers, where do they go? And then let's talk about some of the impacts that affect them on their journey. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, to back up a little bit, and you probably already know this, Andrew, but their historic range was from, Florida, the very end tip of Florida, all the way through the Atlantic, past Greenland into Spain. And historically, we think there were probably 21,000 individuals in the population. And they are named the right whale because they are the right whale to hunt. So we did a really good job of hunting them. They're slow, they max out at about 5 miles per hour. They live close to the coast, and they're huge, and they float when they're killed. So that's why they got that name. Now, as we said, about 384, we think, give or take. And they're locally extinct on the other half of the Atlantic, on the eastern half, so they're extirpated there. And their current range is just your hometown, Canada, all the way down to Florida again. So they're off Canada feeding on these little copepods, these little ocean bugs. in Canada, New England, even probably off the Mid-Atlantic Bight when they can. That's Virginia area, sort of Norfolk. And then they're migrating down to our warm waters off Georgia and Florida to give birth in the winter.
Right.
Yeah. So they migrate
not even down to the tip. It's like usually like Jacksonville area, right? Like almost like northern Florida. Is that where they're at now?
Yeah, on the border with Georgia and Florida. Although Koala and Curlew, the two females last year, migrated all the way into the Gulf, like around the tip of Florida.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know this. I did not know this.
Yes.
Interesting.
Adore those two whales, and I can't wait to see what they're up to this year. Last we heard, they got back safely to the feeding grounds. So
okay. That's good.
TBD on where they are now. But yeah, it's not unheard of. It's happened a couple of times in recent history that North Atlantic right whales have gone up in there.
So it's interesting you mentioned too, like you mentioned two individuals by name. So like a lot of these individuals. There are monitoring programs up and down the coast of the eastern shores, up into Canada. Probably a binational agreement to between scientists and so forth, fisheries and oceans and other organizations and so forth. Now these monitoring programs are huge. They're expensive. Obviously, Oceana is not the organization who does these types of monitoring studies. A lot of times, academia and governments and so forth and consultants. Oceana really relies on collaborations and partners within this. So when you are looking at, especially the voice for these animals, with everything looking around them, which we'll get into in just a second, this collaboration is pretty important. How do you and Oceana like maintain these collaborations, maintain these relationships with so many different organizations and people that are invested in making sure that these animals survive and do well?
Yeah. Well, to your point, we are a policy advocacy organization. So that's sort of where we fit into the puzzle on this conservation issue. And New England Aquarium is the organization that keeps the catalog of North Atlantic right whales up to date. They're in charge of maintaining that and monitoring those whales. As you said, we know every single individual in the population, which is incredible. And some of them have amazing names. They all have catalog numbers, but some of them have names based on the callosity patterns on their rostrum or their nose. So,
okay.
Yeah. So callosity, think like callus. It's like a unique thumbprint on their nose of skin that actually little whale lice, cyamids, inhabit, and it makes it white. And so that pattern pops up, and it's unique to each individual right whale.
Gotcha.
So that's what I do.
I always thought they were barnacles, to be honest. I always thought so. It's okay.
It's like little, and they're kind of big. Like I saw some the other week at the Right Whale Festival. One of our partners had some at their table. Really cool. Yes, that's awesome. Partnership is key. I mean, we work in coalition. We are not the only organization in the policy advocacy space, but to bring it back to theater, like you have to collaborate with other artists. It's not just the actor on stage, right? It's the lighting designer, it's the costume designer, it's the audience who's participating, it's the director. And so all the players in the space are key, including our government partners who are running a lot of these monitoring programs, enforcing the laws that we're advocating for, keeping the science moving forward, all of the important aspects.
Yeah, it's a huge endeavor too, because there's so many people that are involved. I really think it's cool, knowing the individuals and going back to the storytelling. How does that, how do you use your creativity within that to sort of bring life to this population? Because like I can come on this podcast and say like we have to help out this North Atlantic right whale population. If we don't, it's going to be gone. But that's kind of like what you mentioned at the beginning. That's telling facts, right? It's not telling the story, the story of the migration of a particular individual, or just like the other two females you mentioned going around. They seem to like kind of congregate together. Maybe how does that storytelling help when you're dealing with policymakers? Maybe discussing it with specific government officials or anything like that. How do you use that creativity to tell those stories?
Oh man. Well, I think on one level, it's digging into the individual stories, like you mentioned. For example, one of my favorite mothers from last year, her name is Cashew, and she had her third calf last season. She's about 23 years old, we think. And although this is her third calf, she's also been entangled 3 times already that we know of.
Wow.
Yeah. And so if you know about these entanglement injuries, they're horrific, to put it bluntly, right? This line is made of plastic, and as the whales swim, they don't have hands to disentangle themselves. So the line is getting dragged by the water and just is tightening and tightening and tightening until it can saw through their body. Or if it doesn't get that far, it's causing injury because it's an open wound. So it's decreasing their health, impeding their ability to eat. They're getting skinnier because of it. And even though she's been tangled 3 times, she's had 3 calves, which means she's been able to fatten up, have that pregnancy, and nurse. Like, it's mind blowing. And she's my favorite because I think it was Florida Fish and Wildlife got a photo of her last year, belly up, cradling her calf between her flippers. So it's just,
are you serious?
I am not even kidding. That's something they do. They're so tactile, and I want to say affectionate. They're giving their baby a break there at the surface to breathe. Mothers also whisper to their calves on the calving grounds. Like, there's so much cool science still coming out about the species and how they work socially. But yeah, Cash is one of my favorites. So it's the individual stories, and I would also argue it's the if you zoom out, the bigger scale stories, like how whales fit into the ecosystem and how we fit into the ecosystem, right? Because we are all part of this Jenga block that is planet Earth, right? And it turns out they're playing a huge role in fertilizing our oceans, which is just blows my mind continually. So
yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think we don't hear that story enough in terms of that process.
Yeah, sure. So our large baleen whales, so North Atlantic right whales are baleen whales. They don't have teeth. They have these baleen plates that hang down from their mouth, which are, they're mammals like you and I. So the baleen is actually keratin, which is like our fingernails or hair, and it works like a pasta sieve. So they're opening up their mouths and they're filter feeding these tiny bugs at the base of the food pyramid of the ocean, and they're pushing the water out of their mouths, and the baleen plates keep the bugs in so they can eat their food. So these large baleen whales, huge animals, North Atlantic right whales included. We're talking gray whales, humpbacks, blues. I'm going to feel bad about the ones I left out. all the big ones. And North Atlantic right whales are the size of a school bus. So this is a huge animal.
Yeah.
They're eating tons and tons of these tiny copepods, and then they're migrating huge distances. So as they go and they migrate across ocean basins, they're actually fertilizing the ocean with their feces and urine as they go, so much so that they're kicking off basically ocean productivity. That poop and feces has nutrients that are not found in the natural environment. They're called limiting nutrients, like iron, phosphorus, all that good stuff, which the little plants at the surface need to be able to photosynthesize to create oxygen, which we all enjoy. So
every second breath, right?
Yeah.
Every second breath. Yeah. That's cool. I mean, that's just like, again, that's a story that doesn't usually get told, and we know it as a process, and we've learned about it in school and so forth, but we don't really. I think sometimes we take it for granted how cool that actually is in terms of telling it to people and them reacting, being like, oh, wow, so every second breath we take is coming from the feces of whales.
Yeah.
Partly, it's kind of a cool thing to track, and but it's also an important aspect to how we benefit from whales. Instead of just seeing them as these large, amazing individuals, there's the extra benefit from the seeding of the ocean that they do. So that's really cool. You mentioned earlier the entanglements from that one particular whale, and how it saws through. It's very painful, and obviously they can't take the entanglements off. Can you just talk about where these entanglements from fishing lines come from, and then how are we able to mitigate these? As from a policy standpoint, also all the way down from an individual standpoint.
Absolutely. So the whales are becoming entangled as bycatch. Basically, unintentionally caught in these fishing lines in New England, the Northeast, and Canada, primarily in trap pot fisheries. So that's your lobster, that's your Jonah crab, which are these trap pots at the bottom of the ocean that are connected to a buoy on the top so the fishermen can retrieve their catch. And that buoy is attached to a vertical line in the water that connects the whole thing. So these fisheries are extremely dense in New England and Canada, estimated at some places thousands of lines, and the whales are migrating through it, right, to the calving grounds and through their feeding grounds. And they're open mouth, filter feeding as they go, swimming past and through them. So it can get caught in their mouth and their baleen, it can wrap around their head, their body, and they can't disentangle themselves. So, and that being said, though, there is a solution to this entanglement problem, and that is on-demand or ropeless or pop-up gear. It has several names at this point. But the idea is basically we can take the vertical line out of the water in places where whales are detected or we expect to be critical whale habitat, and use this pop-up gear instead. So the trap just remains on the bottom, no line, no buoy, and then when the fishermen come to retrieve their catch, they ping it with like a little scaled down sonar device, and it releases the buoy then and there. Otherwise, the vertical line's not in the water. So again, this solution exists. It's been implemented to great success in California at this point. Looking at some other fisheries, we at Oceana are advocating for policies to kind of make that happen, because you have to have the regulations in place to require it and manage it. Great work on the California Dungeness crab fishery in California. They think they have like don't quote me on the stat now, but like an over 90% success rate with this gear in the fishery last year.
And the idea is it's more of like, will it pop up, I guess, is like the success of it with obviously animals in it so that they can fish. I remember doing an interview with some fishers off the east coast of Canada a number of years ago, and they were talking about the implementation of this, and they were worried that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it was fairly new at that point. Now having actual studies that show, and I know there are some experimental fisheries that are going on right now in Canada, I believe. I don't know in the U.S. as much, but in Canada where they're using those types of pots as well to see the viability and the success rate of that. So more and more studies are coming. The technology is improving every day, which is great to see. And hopefully we can eliminate those. If we can eliminate those lines, that's a big pressure off of these North Atlantic right whales, correct?
Yeah, it would be a huge pressure off. There are experimental fisheries happening on the East Coast of the U.S. As well, which is awesome. And to your point, it's one of the two main threats. So it's vessel strikes and entanglement fishing gear are the two main threats that are keeping this species from recovering. So if we can address, 50% of the problem, that would be incredible.
Oh, it'd be a huge success. How are the fishing communities from like the ones that you are have a relationship with? How are they looking at this type of gear? Are they interested? Are they cautious about it? Because I mean, they've been doing the traditional ones, if we can call it traditional, or the legacy ones, where they have the lines for maybe centuries or even decades. Now going to a new one, it could change things. There's a big learning curve to using it. Are they looking to use it more and want to use it more? Because usually they don't want to hurt whales, obviously, but they want to still be successful with these types of fisheries. Are they interested in it?
Yeah, I would say, I'm learning more in my job every day about the needs of the fisherman community in the U.S. and their viewpoint and the impacts to their community. Like you said, this technology has progressed, as I understand it, leaps and bounds in the past 5 years since it was since the community was starting to experiment with like what solution can we come up with. So the technology is there. It's regulation. It's the cost of the gear, solving that problem. It's understanding the market for that catch. It's reiterating that this is only for when whales are detected or expected in the U.S. And I do know
during certain seasons and so forth. Yeah,
exactly. And I do know on the West Coast for example, in the California Dungeness fishery, it has extended fishermen's season, meaning that they're able to catch more crabs and make more money.
Of course.
They're accessing closures, and if you lose your gear, you can find it. It's got a little pinger on it, so there are some benefits in addition to protecting our marine environment and whales.
Yeah. Well, I never thought of that too, because if you're not going to affect the whales with lines, you can probably use it a lot longer than you would when they're in the area, if you're using it during that time. So that's always great, and then you can always revert back to the lines when they're not in the area, and so forth. So that's really good to hear. So you mentioned that obviously the entanglements, but you also mentioned the ship strikes. My understanding with ship strikes is that these whales tend, like you mentioned earlier, they're slow, but they also tend to hover just below the surface a lot of the times, which makes them a lot harder to detect from ships, especially large shipping vessels, which makes it a lot more complicated in terms of shipping. But I know there's shipping lanes that have been created just to avoid specific migration patterns. Can you just talk a little bit about sort of the history around these ship strikes and how devastating they are, and how, like you meant, is it like a 50-50 split where you get ship strikes and entanglement, or is there one that favors in terms of catching these animals?
Yeah. Well, to your point, these animals love to hang out right below the surface where they're going to feed on that zooplankton, on those copepods. And they also don't have a dorsal fin. So thinking back to our humpback whales, they got that nice little notch you can see as they're coming up to the surface to breathe. North Atlantic right whales don't have that. And so for an animal the size of a school bus, they are extremely hard to spot. They're dark, no dorsal fin. Your best bet is watching that moment when they exhale, right?
Right.
So that's part of the reason why they're so vulnerable to ship strikes. In the U.S., I know in Canada they have moose shipping lanes, which is fantastic. We have a sister campaign in Oceana, Canada, and my colleague Hannah Batcher works on that. So we coordinate quite closely, and I love collaborating with that team in Canada. In the U.S., we have the vessel speed rule, which has seasonal management areas along the East Coast that go into effect when the whales are migrating. So in the calving grounds, that one has just kicked off, and on the 15th, the main calving ground slow zone will kick off, which means if you are a boater or a mariner in that area, you need to go 10 knots or slower to reduce your risk of hitting one of these animals. And trust me, no one wants to hit a North Atlantic right whale, right? That's up to 40 tons, like 70 tons of animal. And
that's a big animal.
It's a big animal. Your boat's probably not going to do great.
Yeah.
And the harm and injury to these animals is horrific. We're talking spinal injuries, slicing through skin to the bone. It's just absolutely horrific. And one example I always come back to is Infinity in 2021. She was on the calving grounds of Florida around St. Augustine, and her calf at that time was a male about a month old. She and her calf were both hit by a small recreational vessel, actually.
Oh, wow.
So I recall under 50 feet in length. And so technically they didn't have to comply with the 10 knot speed limit, but they probably should have, because they killed the calf and they grounded their boat. They lost their boat. So up to a $1.2 million loss, I believe. And Infinity was gravely injured as well. So that's another reproductive female taken out of the mix. So it really pays to go slow for whales when they're there, go slow for those below. Again, only when they're there. They're in the calving grounds in the winter, and in the summer they're up off New England and Canada. So
yeah, it's a tough situation. I remember when in 2017, when the North Atlantic white whales kind of went up into the Gulf of St. Lawrence here in Canada, we weren't expecting them there. We had ships that were moving at 20 knots to go from the mainland to Newfoundland to just bring in like extra groceries and so forth and their regular route, and they had to be slowed down to 10 knots during certain seasons. And it's a difficult thing to manage. Like you said, it's not clear water like you have in Maui, where you can actually see these animals from a distance. Even then, it's difficult when you really look at it from a distance, from like at the level that you're at. But you're looking at darker water with these dark animals, so sometimes it's difficult to be able to capture them, especially if they're just hovering about 5 to 10 feet below the surface, and no dorsal fin. I keep forgetting about that they don't have that, so it's hard to see them pop over. For the shipping lanes and just the management of this, what are we looking at here in terms of how is this? We're not going to stop shipping boats from coming in and out of the U.S. These are major hubs. This is very important for a lot of businesses and so forth. How is that managed in terms of, and around the distribution of these whales?
In the U.S.?
Yeah, in the U.S. Yeah, you don't have to worry about Canada, in the U.S.
Yeah, I would say the seasonal management areas are the main mechanism.
Okay.
And they apply to the larger vessels. So that's going to include your shipping containers. So while the seasonal management areas are in place, vessels need to comply by going 10 knots or slower. We also do dynamic management areas, and those are triggered when we spot 3 or more North Atlantic right whales. Those are voluntary. So not as much teeth as I'd like to those, but we do have those 2 mechanisms. And there's some technology that's being developed. It's not ready to implement on the water today, but still very exciting. What we can do today is slow down just to reduce the risk. Give the captain the chance to maneuver, give the whale a second to hopefully get out of the way.
Well, and some of these big shipping containers, like shipping ship, they're massive. They're like 200-300 feet. It takes a long time for them to move. So being able to slow down, understand where they're going, and maneuver around them if they need to. Hopefully, they can either stay on course or just slightly off, and just to miss these would be a huge impact. And as you said, there aren't many out there, so having more teeth on the voluntary slowdown would be even better, because we need to protect every single one of these. Like 384 may sound like a lot to some people, but when you compare it to 21,000, a couple centuries ago now to 384, that's we're talking about a huge decrease, and it'd be nice to get back up to those numbers if we ever will, but even just getting higher and higher as we go along. Do you know the recent estimate of, or was there an announcement of the recent estimate of reproductive females in that? Because I know that's under 100, right? Is that still under 100?
That's still around 70, as I understand it.
70. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So it's still not very many in terms of a population of 380 some odd.
I will say we had 4 first-time mothers last season, which is fantastic.
Nice.
Yes. Great news. Love to hear it. And we also had one of the old-timers, one of the most prolific moms, also had a calf last year.
That's great.
She's around 8 or 7. Oof. But yeah, amazing contribution to the species on her part. And I think it's Grand Teton. Yeah, her name's Grand Teton.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, but to your point about the reproductive females, they are, because of these stresses of entanglement, vessel strikes, everything going on, we are seeing a trend in that they are maturing later in life. They're smaller, they're skinnier, they're less able to be reproductively active, and they're having longer intervals between calves. So based on southern right whales, which we know are a robust, healthy population that has rebounded from industrial whaling days in the southern hemisphere, we think the healthy interval is about 3 years for a mature female between calves.
Okay.
We're seeing in our North Atlantic right whales about 7 to 10 years between calves. So they are, so they're stressed out. So again, reducing these 2 threats is going to have impacts in every way possible, both reducing death and mortality, injuries, and hopefully increasing health so that these females can be more reproductively active and successful.
Right. Being that entanglements and from fishing gear and ship strikes are the major factors, do we know if there's anything else that's stressing them out in terms of food availability? Or because we know climate change is moving things around. We know that that could move blooms of zooplankton around. Do we have any research or any data around that they might be stressed just for finding food?
I mean, that's definitely a component.
Yeah.
Ocean noise pollution as well is surely a component as well. Sound is key in the ocean environment. Every life form in the ocean is evolved with sound. And so when we throw something that's masking sound or just deafening them, of course, that's going to have impacts to these large whales. I think part of the reason we focus on vessel strikes and entanglement is because it's a human-caused problem. And
Right.
at some level, I think it's our obligation to solve it.
Of course.
And just such a horrific way for any animal to die as well. So.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You don't want to see anything like that. It looks like pure torture, to be honest. Like when you see entanglements or even a ship strike, as you mentioned, some of the things that could happen, it just breaks my heart just thinking that could happen to a calf or a mother or a male. Like it's just we don't want to see anything die in those kind of ways. And obviously taking away those would be great, but also removing or preventing any other human direct contact, oil drilling, things like that is always helpful as well. I used to be a consultant as a marine mammal observer in the Arctic, and one of the things for oil exploration was the sound that goes into the exploration when you do the surveys, and that in itself, the amount, the way it was described to me was if a human's in the water when those sound guns go off, your eardrums are just blown to bits. I can just imagine what it does to a large whale. And so preventing that from coming in is probably going to be one of the other things that will happen, and moving more towards renewables and so forth, I think will be the way to go in the future for both countries, in Canada and the US. Nora, this has been wonderful to be able to talk to you about this. Is there anything else that you wanted to say to the audience in terms of, everybody that's listening to this wants a call to action. They want to be able to feel like they can do something, whether it's learn a little bit more or take action in terms of signing petitions or, lending their name to something or even contributing to donations. Could you provide some call to actions that would help with these North Atlantic right whales?
Yes, I would love to. Join us. Come join us as a wave maker at Oceana. You can sign up at oceana.org. This is really important right now, specifically for North Atlantic right whales, because the Marine Mammal Protection Act, which is our national law that underpins all of this conservation work and protects all our marine mammals in the U.S., has come under threat in Congress. So we have a petition you can sign to say, you care about these animals, this law works, please don't take it apart. And it'll go to your lawmaker. So you can join and sign the petition there. You can call your elected official. They need to document those calls. Your call will make a difference. You can make your voice heard that way. Joining a local organization group in your community is also a great way to get started when you care about that does issues you're interested in. Yeah, I cannot
That's a lot.
emphasize.
That's a lot of options.
Yes.
Nora, this has been wonderful. I want to thank you so much for coming on. And obviously, these call to actions, I know we say it at the end, but they're extremely important for everybody to take part in. If you're interested in just like Nora, like trying to join the fight, you may have a different career and you can't dedicate your full career to it, but you can lend your voice, you can lend your interest, you can lend your actions, and go to oceana.org to be able to find out how you can do those and sign up as a wave maker. Nora, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us more information on these wonderful, wonderful animals. Looking forward to having you back sometime to get more updates on North Atlantic right whales.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Nora, for joining us on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. It was great to have you on the podcast. I just love to hear people's stories about how they came to where they are right now. And Nora's story is just a unique one that we not necessarily have seen that particular path, but we've seen similar paths of just kind of meandering through the life and being able to find something that you really want to fight for. And Nora has found that in these North Atlantic right whales. Not only is she finding it from a scientific point of view, but also from a storytelling point of view. There's a lot of stories that we can tell, and with monitoring efforts that have happened and the ability to connect people with storytelling in these whales is just an amazing addition to the weaponry, I guess, we have for conservation. And I think it's something that is needed when we talk about conservation and we talk about humanizing in a way for humans to connect with these whales and to hear about ship strikes, to hear about whale entanglements, but also to hear about some of the amazing feats and distribution of like 2 individuals, as she mentioned, and then the other of like seeing a calf after, you know, a mother about 7 or 8 that's older having a calf after a long time. We're seeing those stories come to life through Nora's storytelling, and I just think that's wonderful. So I can't wait to have Nora back on the podcast to talk about North Atlantic right whales. And I would love to hear your comments and your questions about that. Just let me know in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this episode on your favorite podcast app, thank you so much. That's where we started. We're going to always continue with the podcast. I mean, this is a podcast. We have a video podcast as well with the YouTube channel, but the audio podcast is always where it's at. It's always my roots, and I love talking on this microphone through audio, through video. It doesn't really matter. This is something that's always important. We need to connect with everybody. So if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, you can reach me by going to Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. And of course, you can go to speakupforblue.com/contact, fill out the form and go straight to my email. There's so many ways to connect with me online. I encourage you to do all of it. I'll put all the connections in the show notes. I want to thank you so much for joining me, and thanking Nora for joining us on this episode, and thanking you for listening and sharing this episode if you think this is really important to share. And thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin from the True North Strong and Free. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.